The air inside the arena tonight doesn't feel like a wrestling show. It feels like an exhaled breath that everyone is too afraid to pull back in. For weeks, the blue brand has been coasting on a strange, hollow momentum, a machine running without its most vital gear. The ring is empty, bathed in a cold, clinical spotlight that catches the drifting dust motes, while the crowd sits in a state of suspended animation. There is no chanting, no rhythmic clapping, just a low-frequency hum of thousands of people waiting for a ghost to manifest. The commentary team has gone uncharacteristically quiet, their headsets resting on the desk as they stare at the entrance ramp with the kind of wide-eyed apprehension usually reserved for a natural disaster. It is a terrifying stillness that suggests whatever happens next isn't part of the script, but a rupture in the reality of the industry itself. You can see it in the faces of the fans in the front row. The usual excitement has been replaced by a localized, frantic confusion. They are looking at the curtain as if it might catch fire, clutching their signs with white-knuckled intensity. The flickering LED boards around the ring have settled into a dull, static gray, stripping the environment of its usual neon vibrance. It feels like the moment before a storm breaks, where the birds stop singing and the wind simply vanishes. This isn't the pipe bomb energy of years past, something far more visceral and unsettling. It is the realization that a vacuum has been created, and the pressure is building to a point where something has to shatter. Suddenly, the house lights don't just dim, they die. No. The blackout is absolute, plunging the arena into a darkness so thick you can almost feel it pressing against your skin. There is no pre-roll video, no familiar catchphrase echoing through the rafters, and no pyrotechnics to signal a hero's arrival. Instead, there is only the sound of a single, rhythmic heartbeat thumping through the subwoofers, slow and heavy. It's a sound that mimics the internal panic of the locker room, a steady reminder that time is running out for the status quo. In this void, the crowd remains paralyzed, too shocked to cheer and too intrigued to look away. The silence isn't a lack of sound anymore. It's a presence, a physical weight that announces the world is about to change. The first note of the music doesn't play. It's groans. It's a distorted, slowed-down version of a theme we once knew, stripped of its arrogance and replaced with a haunting, industrial funeral march. When the silhouette finally appears at the top of the ramp, it isn't the polished, shimmering goddess the marketing packages promised. Jade Cargill stands in the shadows, her frame more imposing than ever, but her posture is different. It's rigid, almost predatory. She isn't playing to the hard camera, and she isn't flashing the $1,000,000 smile that defined her rise. She is a woman who has walked through a fire that no one knew was burning, and she has come out the other side with a cold, terrifying clarity, as she begins her slow descent toward the ring. The commentary team finally finds their voices, but they aren't shouting. Their whispers are filled with a genuine, shaky disbelief that cuts through the speakers. They talk about the months of personal leave that the dirt sheets couldn't explain, the rumors of a career-ending disillusionment, and the dark whispers that she was never coming back. The camera cuts to a group of children in the front row who aren't cheering. They are staring up at her with a sense of awe that borders on fear. This isn't a homecoming. It's an invasion of a space that thought it had moved on without her. Every step she takes seems to vibrate through the floorboards, a slow, deliberate march that feels less like a return and more like a reckoning. When she reaches the ring, she doesn't slide under the bottom rope or leap onto the apron. She stops. She looks at the ring post as if it's a relic of a life she no longer recognizes. The crowd is now completely divided. Half are standing in a stunned, respectful silence, while the other half are whispering frantically, trying to process the sheer intensity radiating from her. There are no welcome back chants because the woman standing there doesn't look like she wants to be welcomed. She looks like she's here to take back something that was stolen in her absence, but her eyes suggest that the cost of that recovery might be higher than anyone is prepared to pay. She steps into the squared circle, and the atmosphere shifts from uneasy to dangerously volatile. The visual of Jade standing in the center of the ring, bathed in that single, unforgiving spotlight, becomes an instant focal point for a global firestorm. Within minutes of her appearance, the digital landscape is in a state of absolute meltdown. Backstage, the atmosphere is described by witnesses as suffocating. Cameras catch glimpses of veteran stars standing in the hallways, their faces pale, staring at the monitors in a trance-like state. There is no celebratory greeting waiting for her behind the curtain. There is only a corridor of people who suddenly realize their spot on the card has just been deleted. The hierarchy of the women's division, which had finally found a fragile balance, has been decimated in a single segment without a single word being spoken. The locker room tension isn't just professional, it's deeply, uncomfortably personal. Reports begin to leak about heated closed-door meetings and talent expressing genuine safety concerns, not about physical risk, but about the narrative vacuum Jade creates. She is a sun that pulls everything into her orbit, and for those who have spent the last year scratching and clawing for relevance, her return feels like a death sentence to their aspirations. The media chaos is equally relentless, with journalists scrambling to figure out how a return of this magnitude was kept so quiet in an era of constant leaks. It wasn't just a secret, it was a ghost story that everyone assumed was a myth, until the Phantom stood in the middle of the ring and breathed. But the most haunting aspect of the aftermath is the footage of Jade leaving the arena. She doesn't stop for autographs, she doesn't acknowledge the cameras, and she doesn't hop into a waiting limo with a victory cigar. She walks to her car alone, her gym bag slung over her shoulder, looking like someone who has just performed a grim but necessary task. The legacy pressure is now an immovable mountain on her shoulders. She isn't just carrying the weight of being a superstar. She's carrying the weight of a division that people claim she broke just by showing up. The question isn't whether she can still perform, it's whether the environment can survive her presence. She has become the ultimate disruptor, a force of nature that the corporate machine is now terrified to manage. As the days turn into weeks, the reality of Jade's return begins to bleed into her personal life, revealing the fractures that the spotlight usually hides. The legacy she built was supposed to be a fortress for her family, a gilded path for her daughter to follow, but now it feels more like a prison. Behind the scenes, the pressure to maintain the immortal persona has begun to clash with the raw, human exhaustion of a woman who has been fighting battles the public will never see. Her family, once her greatest source of strength, is now caught in the crossfire of a schedule that demands her soul and a fan base that demands her perfection. The storm isn't just her nickname anymore. It's the climate of her daily existence. The consequences are visible in the small moments, the way she lingers in the dark of the gorilla position before her music hits, or the way she looks at her own reflection in the locker room mirror with a sense of profound detachment. This isn't the story of a champion reclaiming her throne. It's the story of a queen who has realized the throne is made of glass and the floor is covered in the blood of her peers. The divided crowd energy at every show only adds to the psychological toll. Half the audience sees her as the savior the division desperately needed, while the other half sees her as a corporate entity that takes up too much oxygen. She is a woman caught between being an icon and being a human, and the gap between those two identities is widening every single night. The backstage conflicts intensify as the new guard of the division begins to openly revolt. There are whispers of selective booking and special treatment, but the truth is far more complex. The company needs her because she is the only one who can make the world stop and stare. Yet they fear her because she knows her own value better than any executive ever could. She has become a mirror for everyone else's insecurities. When they look at her, they don't see a colleague. They see their own limitations. This isn't just about wrestling matches or championship belts. It's about the existential dread of being eclipsed by someone who doesn't even have to try to be the center of the universe. The crown isn't just heavy, it's starting to burn. By the time the first major event since her return arrives, the narrative has shifted from a shocking moment to a fundamental crisis of identity for the entire brand. Jade Cargill sits in her dressing room, the door locked, the lights low. She isn't preparing a promo or studying tape. She is simply sitting in the silence. The same silence that greeted her on that first night back on SmackDown. The realization has finally set in. She didn't return to save the division, and she didn't return to break it. She returned because she had nowhere else to go where the world made sense, and yet the world she came back to is now more alien to her than the one she left. This was never about a viral clip or a spike in the ratings. Those are the metrics of a machine that doesn't care about the human heart beating beneath the muscle and the gold. The true twist of her return isn't a heel turn or a new alliance. It's the quiet, devastating admission that the Jade Cargill the world sees is a character that has successfully consumed the woman who created it. She has become so good at being the storm that she has forgotten how to be the calm. Every cheer and every boo is just another brick in a wall that separates her from the people she loves, and the industry she gave everything to is now the very thing that makes her feel the most alone. As the camera pans away from her one last time, leaving her in the shadows of the arena, a haunting question remains for everyone who watched her return. We cheered for the spectacle, we analyzed the fallout, and we debated the legacy. But did we ever stop to ask what it cost her to stand there? We demand these moments of shock and awe. We crave the break the internet reveals. But we never account for the wreckage left in the wake of the return. As the screen fades to black, the emotional weight doesn't lift. It settles in the pit of your stomach. If Jade Cargill truly broke SmackDown, was it because of her power, or was it because she showed us that even the strongest icons are eventually crushed by the very pedestals we build for them? Would you like me to develop a detailed storyline for her first 3 months back to see how this internal conflict plays out?